believe it or don't believe it. But again, your government officials have to have a certain amount of intelligence. Otherwise, and I want to say this about intelligence. I had a younger brother one time ask me, what if you marry someone and find out that that person was not as intelligent as you thought they were? I said back to him, you can't talk to someone for 5 minutes without knowing something about where their intellectual level is. Maybe after 1 or 2 minutes, you might not tell. After 5, you can usually tell. They'll say things that give it away. Oh, yes, where their intellectual level is or is not. And also, if you are, if somebody is down here on their intellectual level, and you're up here, and you're trying to convince this person of something, forget it. They're going to look on anything you decide as being both immoral or stupid. And I want to say this, folks. I don't know if you have most of your younger grandchildren. Every teenager knows more than his or her parents. Just ask them.
Just ask.
Every teenager, yes. All right. But a lot of time when they get to be, oops, say, my dad and my mom knew a lot. All right, anyway, the government was based on merit. Again, Thomas Jefferson believed the same thing, and he said it was up to the people. Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence. When the government fails to suit the ends of the people, it's up to the people to alter or abolish that government. Of course, this philosophy led to the Civil War, where in a lot of ways the rebels were on the wrong side. So just because you're in the mood for rebelling doesn't mean you're right. In most cases, the rebels are wrong. And I must say this about revolutions. Rarely does a revolution work. The people who revolt think, but even if they win, they lose. All right. The people of Cuba did not like Batista. They got rid of Batista and got Castro. The Russians did not like the Tsars. They got rid of Tsar Nicholas and they got Lenin, Stalin, Malenkov, Brezhnev, Khrushchev, so on and so forth. Now I can name you 2 men who decided, I don't want to stay at home. I want to be home. I don't like my dad's rules. I don't like my mother telling me to clean out the sink. I know what I'll do to get away from it. I'm going to go join the Marines. They both went off and joined Marines, and those Marine corporals made their dad seem like a nice, easy-going, quiet, mild-mannered man. And do you know something? The Marines told him to clean out the sinks. Yes, they did. They also told him to shine his shoes, and they inspected far more closely than his dad ever did. Oh, yes. And many a young man, if the Marines would have him, has learned the hard way. The Marines are not escaped from rules and discipline. All right, all right. Now, the one big weakness, so to Confucius, Confucian philosophy had nothing to offer a poor young mother whose 2-year-old had just died of an illness. And this happened a lot, still does happen, but not as much as one did. Confucius had nothing at all to offer in the way of consolation to that person. Now, Confucius did emphasize compassion. Unlike Hinduism, I think I mentioned Buddha also believed in compassion. Confucius believed in compassion, but in his mind, once a person had died, that was it. Never would see them again. Never would count. In other words, you and that person were separated forever. Again, each of you can make up your own mind on what you believe, but it simply lacked spirituality. Well, into this scenario, about the same time, there came a new way of thinking: Taoism. It has been said that I believe your book may have a wood carving of Confucius meeting the head of the Taoist, or the man who founded Taoism. They could not understand each other, couldn't even talk to each other. The Taoist man went out in the snow, was never seen again, but his papers were found, and a religion was found. As far as Confucius, he became, or his religion, or his philosophy became the official religion of China for more than 2,000 years. But now the Taoism was very, very spiritual. In fact, to the Europeans' mind, none of whom had ever been to China, China appeared to be a land of magic. A lot of Taoism can be associated with magic. The Taoists spent a lot of time in Tibet, and Tibet became a land associated with magic and spirituality. It's not that I'm pushing. In fact, I read a book one time that magic is the worst form of religion there is, because magic says, in my relationship with the spirit world, I'm the boss and the spirit world is my slave. Be that as it may, believe what you will. But the Taoists, now, some years ago, I got about 3 or 4 letters from a dog, it's been more than 30 years ago, trying to get me to join. I declined to join. But they claimed that there was this monastery in Tibet where all the men there looked like they were 20 years old. It was a Taoist monastery, but they were actually 130 years old. I asked a Chinese man about that one time. He had heard the same story. The problem is you can never prove when these men were born. They never produced birth certificates. But they claim to be, and they claim that by proper diet, proper meditation, proper exercise, and proper sexual technique, you can reverse the aging process and become young again. Believe what you will. They call their belief science. No Westerner would call these beliefs science because they cannot actually be duplicated, replicated. They have not been proven by any method that we would understand as science. But a lot of the Chinese embraced Taoism because it had a spiritual side. They believed strongly in an afterlife. They believed in the existence of the soul. So it supplied some things that Confucius did not have. All right. All right. With that, I am going to close out this part of it, but don't get me wrong, it's not time to leave yet. I want to go over several things, maybe 8 or 10 things, that all these civilizations had in common. Number one, as bad as it may sound, they were all slave societies. Slavery was taken for granted. Now, I do want to say this while on the subject. There never was any other slave society that was as racial as the slave society that went on in the United States before the Civil War. Never. These people would enslave their own people as well as enslave others. But who became slaves? Persons who had committed crimes, persons who had been involved in a war and lost, persons who had been stolen by their enemies from their homes, persons who had fallen too deeply into debt and could not pay. These became the slaves, but they were all slave societies. Generally, these people lived either in villages or towns, or even in cities. They generally lived along the banks of rivers, which meant that there were many, many, many acres of land that was not settled. Acres of land given over to forest land. But these people were very religious. Very. Not until the time of Buddha do we have anyone who we aren't sure if he had any religion about him or not. But these people were, you don't find religious skeptics until about 600 BCE. And I want to say this, folks, let's face it, if you worship the sun, I mean, at least the sun exists. The moon, while it does exist, the wind, yeah, that exists too. And the storms, Enki must be alive and well because we have a really big one heading close by. Another issue, but anyway, but they worshipped the weather, they worshipped the phenomena of nature. They tended to be polytheistic with the exception of the Jews and the Persians, but other than that, they're mostly polytheistic. Now, one thing these people did not have that the next people we talk about, we're going to start on Wednesday of next week talking about Greece, and we'll spend 3 lessons on Greece and 3 on Rome. The Greeks had, a lot of their cities had a constitution, and they followed not a man but a constitution. We hold elections this year because our constitution tells us to. We will hold elections again 2 years from now because it's in our constitution. But in those days, they had no constitution. The king made up his laws as he went along. I mean, in England, for a while, they'd tell a king, now you must make up, or you must decide which of the old laws you want to keep within 50 days. And the king had 50 days to decide which laws he'd keep, which laws he'd make up, which laws he'd throw out. But these people apparently made up their laws as they felt they needed to. Everything about the government centered around one man. Democracy was not very well known among them. Now, this changes when we come to Indo-Europeans. Particularly, Europeans tended to limit the power of their kings and to have democracy more so than other peoples. These people had armies. Oh yeah, among them, conquest. Conquest was looked on as being a virtue, and it was believed that enough conquest would lead to world peace. But they had governments, they had conquest, they had armies, they had religion, and they tried to keep a certain amount of law. But along the way, somewhere, some people became less equal than others. Now, what you had were a group of civilized people living in the cities, and then scattered throughout the countryside would be a bunch of nomadic people living by their herds, or in some cases following herds they could not tame, like following the elk or whatever, and certain types of other animals that you could not tame. So they'd follow herds. Then your nomadic people, you had your uncivilized people living outside of the areas where the civilized live. And eventually, and I can name case after case, the uncivilized would come in and conquer the civilized and take them. The Aryans are one example, took over the Dravidians. The Amorites took over the Sumerians. And eventually we're going to find the last case where this happened was where the barbaric German people took over the Romans. And I had a student ask me, why have we not seen a civilization fall? We might be very well on the verge of it, folk. And the civilization referring to is Western civilization involved Europe and the Americas, North and South America and Europe. Western civilization, to me, might be well on the verge of falling, because Europe seems like it's doing everything that civilizations have fallen have done. They generally, the civilized people kept history, but they did not keep history to the same standards that we do. The Egyptian history was notoriously distorted. The purpose of their history seemed to have been to build up their own people any way they could and make their own people look older than anyone else and having been greater than anyone else. And also, this is going to sound unique, but they looked to the past as being the time of their greatness and tried to recopy the past. Something that some of us have done, yeah, that the past was the time of our greatness, and we want to copy the past. The former days are better than these. No, they're not. Not necessarily, not always. But they looked on it that way. And the difference was they believed what we're now finding out, that in past time, their people had lived better than what they were living in their time. All right. Again, these people believed in things that today we would call superstition. Superstition, what's that? Well, it's been said every baseball player is superstitious. I mean, let's face it. When that man swings his bat, he has no idea where that ball is going. Nobody knows. But there was a pitcher named Jim Lorenberg back in 1967 who noticed he did better on a road trip. So when he had to play the World Series at home, he rented a hotel rather than rather than live at home, because he said the hotel will make my body think I'm on the road, and that way I'll pitch better than I would. But ball players have been known to take rabbit's feet with them. And Kay, I want to tell you something. That rabbit had 4 feet. He got a skin. But oh yeah, 4-leaf. Now superstition says if you can get the right formula, or the right amulet, or the right talisman, the gods will favor you. So 4-leaf clovers, horseshoes, all these things were looked on as being things that would curry the favor of God. Okay.